call to River Landing Conversations. The FURL, the Free University of River Landing work group, as you know, had some conversations with senior staff last fall, and the response was very positive, both from participants and from the audience. And the FURL group thought it would be a good idea to continue that process and indeed to expand it a little bit. So we're starting this spring with 2 more senior staff conversations, and then we'll follow that with 6 conversations with residents. So over the next 8 weeks, on Friday afternoons at 3:30, if the sun continues to shine and the creeks don't rise and we don't get preempted, FURL will be joining you at 3 o'clock on Friday to have a chat with an interesting colleague and community member. And speaking of interesting chats and interesting colleagues, Helen Shields is joining us this time around as a co-conversationalist, co-facilitator. And it's an absolute joy to have you, Phyllis, Helen, well, there's a great start, and to have you, Ken Massey,
yes,
the senior chaplain at River Landing,
yes,
among other things.
Which relates to my age, right?
And Ken, welcome.
Thank you.
It's lovely to have you.
Good to be here.
As we continue this series.
Yeah.
Well, Ken, we know that friends call you Ken. Is that your real name?
Oh, my real name is Kenneth William.
Kenneth William.
My mother named me Kenneth William. The name Kenneth means handsome, so she was a woman of extreme hope when she named me. And William was a family name. Her father and my grandfather was William, so that's how I inherited that. I was Kenneth for most of my life, and when I moved to Colorado, people started calling me Ken. You know, it wasn't Ken like with an E, it was like almost like an A, Ken. So yeah, that's what people have called me ever since.
What would you choose as your name if you had a chance? Or would you have changed it?
I didn't really like my name. All my friends were named Roger and Buddy and George and Pete and things like that, and so Kenneth sounded a little too formal for me. I've thought that if my name were you, then people who said, "Hey, you," wouldn't sound like just an impersonal kind of thing, but they would be calling my name. So maybe you.
All right. All right, you.
Hey, you. I'll stick with Ken now. Okay. It's kind of grown on me.
All right.
And I'm sure many people over the years have acknowledged that your mother's hopes have indeed been realized. So I couldn't help put that one in the bag. So Ken, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Beaumont, Texas. Beaumont, Texas is right near the coast of southeast Texas. It is the location of the first oil discovery in Texas, Spindletop oil well. And it is a place where there was a lot of migration from French Catholics in southern Louisiana, which we called Cajuns.
Yes.
Yep. And obviously some drunk Cajun named the town because it means beautiful mountain. And there is not a mountain anywhere. So in his dreams or in his intoxication, he thought, beautiful mountain, that's what we'll call it. So Beaumont, Texas, it's a refinery town now. Lots of oil refineries in that area. Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange, the Golden Triangle. Yeah, it's a redneck place, basically.
Yes. Yeah. I remember the other side of Louisiana where the other side of the border in Louisiana, and remember that country somewhat fondly.
Yes. Interesting things. I mean, Cajun festivals are wonderful eating experiences.
absolutely,
The
yeah.
food is
They're
just
great.
unbelievable.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
yeah. I miss that, but nothing else. You know, the mosquito is the state bird in Texas,
Yes.
or at least in Beaumont it is.
So where did you go from Beaumont? How long did you stay in
Oh,
Beaumont?
yeah, I was
Where
in
did you
Beaumont
go
until
from
I was
there?
20. I went through my first 2 years of college. Since I didn't really know what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go, I went to the local college, Lamar. Yeah, I think it was Lamar University by then, may have been Lamar College. Had a pretty good architectural kind of program, but went there for a couple of years and got my basics out of the way. And then I still didn't know what I wanted to do, so I decided I would move to Denver. Because John Denver was very popular back then, his music and the Rocky Mountains, and my brother had moved to Colorado to go to school, and I just loved being there. And so I moved to Denver and got a job and did a little schooling on the side. I did that for 2 years. I call that my 2-year sabbatical. You know, after you go to 2 years to college, you need a sabbatical.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Indeed.
So I did my 2 years, and then came back to Baylor and finished at Baylor and went on to seminary from there in Texas. Yeah, so I was a Texan and 2 years in Colorado, back to Texas, to Mississippi to serve as a pastor, back to Texas to serve as a pastor, then to North Carolina in 1997. And so I've been here since 1997.
And you were in Greensboro.
Yeah, First Baptist.
On Broadway.
Friendly.
On Friendly,
Yes.
Yeah. Need.
Yeah.
We know what your title is. Pastor, chaplain, pastor, provider of wonderful Sunday afternoon vespers. And that's what probably most people know or would think about when they think of you in your role here. But what, as the late Paul Harvey would say, is the rest of the story?
The rest of the story.
In terms of your life at River Landing.
So a lot of folk have experience in a congregation, and so they have known pastors. And it's easy to assume that basically that's what I do at River Landing. Like I'm somehow the pastor of this community, but I'm not. A chaplain is really a different duck. A chaplain takes sort of a slice of what a pastor of a local church does and does that, but there's a whole bunch a pastor does that a chaplain doesn't do. A pastor is a primary teacher, a keeper of the church doctrine. He is an administrator, or she is an administrator, worship leader, that sort of thing. And a pastor of a local church will also do crisis ministry and counseling. And that's sort of the biggest piece where we overlap. Yeah. So a chaplain does hospital visits. A chaplain does crisis ministry. A chaplain does memorial services. A chaplain does grief ministry. And that's a little tiny slice of what a normal pastor does. Now, we have Vesper service, but traditionally our Vesper service was led by people from the community, pastors, ministers in the community. And I would organize the service, but they would come do the sermon and some other things too. But since COVID, that has fallen more on me. And so I have felt more like a pastor the last year doing that worship service, and having to do it online or on our broadcasting channel has been a challenge, and to learn the technology to do that. But a chaplain is not a sectarian is the big difference. If you have a minister, your minister is Presbyterian or Methodist or Catholic or Episcopalian or something. And chaplains need to, by nature, be ecumenical. Because our job is not to try to get everyone in our community to believe like we do. It is to honor and respect the faith that they bring to this community, regardless of what it is. So if you don't have a tolerance for other belief systems, you can't be a chaplain. And more than a tolerance, a respect. So I'm with people in some of their most difficult times, which is an incredible honor and a blessing. And I can't be a person who extends to them grace and hope and love while I am judging their religion. See, you can't do that. You can't do that. So a chaplain is someone who is deeply respectful of various religious traditions and wants to help a resident dig as deeply into their own faith as they possibly can. So I'm a non-sectarian, is a good way to say it.
Well, since you had pastorships before in churches, what did you have to learn, or how did you shape your mind to take on all of this?
Right. So there are training mechanisms for ministers to learn to be respectful of other faith perspectives. And the classic one for chaplains is called clinical pastoral education. And it is an opportunity to grow in your ability to minister to a variety of people, because the settings are hospitals or places like River Landing, where you encounter people of different faiths or no faith at all, by the way. And chaplains don't come to the door and say, "Are you a person of faith? Well, I could come and see you, but if you're not, then I've got to leave," because we try to serve people who don't have any developed faith at all. But clinical pastoral education is one, and there are lots of opportunities for continuing education for ministers out and about that have a chaplaincy focus, because it's a really big industry. There are now corporate chaplains. A lot of businesses will hire chaplains because they find that the better care they give to their employees, the better they do as a company. There are chaplaincy organizations that provide chaplains to businesses part-time so that the business doesn't have to hire them. They pay the company that provides the chaplain. So a little outsourcing kind of stuff there. So a lot of people who want to sort of make sure that their folk are looked after, especially in difficult times, will hire a chaplain. So, yeah.
Well, after what you've just explained, in all that you do, you don't have a typical day at River Landing, do you?
No. In fact, I was going to change the question to sort of a typical week.
Okay, tell us about that.
Yeah, because the days can be very different. And I'm going to sort of think about pre-pandemic, because it's changed a little bit since the pandemic. I've been restricted too. So yeah, a typical week would be a hospital visitation or two. One of our residents has gone for surgery or a crisis of some kind, and so I have regular trips. My car knows how to get to High Point Regional, Wake Forest now, knows how to get there all by itself, and occasionally a trip to Wake Forest or to Greensboro.
Does your car have a parking place at?
I make one, yeah. And of course, I live in Greensboro, so I'd frequently do hospital runs at the beginning or end of the day, so that I could save on mileage and driving. So hospital visitation, I have 2 or 3 people every day that stop by my office just to talk, just to chat. And sometimes it really is just a chat, and sometimes the chatting is an intro to something that they want to talk about that's of significance. And so I always thought that my ears were a little too big, but they're never too big to be a chaplain. And we don't have any uninteresting people here. So it's really a joy to be able to be allowed into the life of the residents who drop by and just chat and visit. And I've made a list of everything they've ever talked about. I'm going to share that with you now. One of the things that chaplains are committed to is confidentiality. I don't, if someone shares something with me, I don't run to Tom and tell him, or run to Lisa, or run to Cindy. And I hope that I can build a level of trust with residents so that they know that they will have a conversation with me that they don't have to be afraid of any judgments from me. I'm going to hear, I'm going to understand, I'm going to empathize. And it's amazing how often talking about your problem or issue helps you discover your own path of what to do about it. They're not coming there for advice. The chaplains are not advice givers. We are mirrors. We hold up mirrors to people and help them see what's going on in their own life. And frequently, and I think this is Holy Spirit kind of stuff, God stuff, God will reveal a path forward for them in that conversation. So that's far superior than me being, the wise guru at the top of the hill that everybody climbs up for advice. That's not the model. So people will come by and visit. Obviously, I have a Vesper service to plan every week, and so I'll create the service for that. Sometimes I'm the preacher. Other times we have guest preachers. And so organizing that piece is a lot of it, especially when we were having local ministers. I would have to create a calendar and make sure they're coming and they have remembered, because Sunday afternoon, sometimes they zone out. We've had people that were scheduled to preach that didn't show up because it's Sunday afternoon. I mean, they had this big, huge Sunday morning thing where they expended all their energy. They went home, maybe they laid down and conked out, and they never got up. So Vespers is a part. I have an occasional meeting. I'm part of a resident services team, so we have larger planning meetings and things like that. I do an occasional class, typically one in the fall, one in the spring. We have an ongoing grief support group that I facilitate. And we've had other things like Zoom calls during the COVID stuff. And I was beginning to take the steps to form a cancer support group here right before COVID hit, utilizing resources from American Cancer Society. And they're open to coming out here to do some of that, but everything got stopped last year. So support group kind of stuff. And I occasionally get to take off my clerical collar and be other people here, which is an interesting part of my job too.
Well,
it's not in the job description.
That was my next question.
Okay.
Is things that you especially enjoy or activities, and I can think of one, probably what you're talking about.
I like being serious all the time. No, I found out a long time ago that laughter and humor, and it really does release dopamine. I mean, it's good for your brain. It helps you negotiate the difficulties of life. And so I try to prescribe that liberally, So even in our grief support group, there are times of some laughter, and that's healing. That's really healing. But yeah, that's a wonderful way to, I think, squeeze the juice out of life. And so I love to do that. Yeah, if I can make somebody laugh, I've done something positive for them.
Well, what about when your relatives visit?
Oh, yes, when my relatives visit. Of course, I don't claim any of them. Many of them are very unsophisticated. Not like moi.
Nice pronunciation.
Yes,
there.
yes.
Wow.
So alter egos. Yeah, it's better to not keep them hidden. When you keep them hidden, they really do take a life of their own. When you let them out of the closet, they're just kind of fun, And
Well,
then you put them back in the closet when you're done.
But they definitely make people laugh here.
Yeah, I hope so.
One of my favorite questions in these discussions is if all the details are taken care of and a little magic happened perhaps, who are three people that you would like to have a meal or a visit with, and sort of why?
Yeah, why? Let me tell you, I've heard that question asked before a little differently, and here's how it was asked. If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose? And I said, living. Having dinner with dead people really isn't that engaging. But I think I understand what you're meaning.
Well, yes. I said there's a little magic in
yes, that's
play.
Right.
And we have some resources that some of that magic can be brought to bear, if the answer is correct.
Right. So no famous people. I've met some famous people, and I don't find them that interesting. So interesting people is who I would want. And one of the folk I thought about was Agent 355. Agent 355 is a woman whose name we do not know, who was a spy for George Washington during the Revolutionary War. And what they suppose about her is that she was a high society person who lived in New York City that was able to rub elbows with the British loyalist types and then communicate information to George Washington, but she obviously risked her life to do that. And I just think she would have some real stories to tell.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln suffered from melancholy, is what they called it back then, but we call it depression. And it was chronic for him. He suffered with it all his life. But it made him creative, and it made him interpersonal in ways that he would not have been otherwise. And I would just like to talk to him about the struggle of going through Civil War as a president. And I would learn a few things from that. And probably MLK for the same reason. I've always thought he was a great preacher and respected him for that and respected him for laying his life on the line to try to make this a country that lives up to its principles, you know, of equality. So probably those three. And others, if I had time, if I had extra magic.
Well, we know from sometimes that you have performed here that you have music in your background.
Yes.
Tell us something about maybe songs and music too, instruments, songs that you like, what they mean to you. Or
Yeah. So my mom was a musician, and she either taught me or passed along to me an eclectic taste. And so there's really not much music that I can't appreciate. A couple, I'm not gonna mention them. But I appreciate a lot of different kinds of music. I mean, I grew up listening to country music because I grew up in Texas. But I also grew up playing classical music. I played the cello all the way, you know, from 6th grade through high school. Later on, I picked up the mandolin and the guitar and played in a bluegrass band. So I love bluegrass music. Lately, I love English choral music. I don't know, there's a pathos to it that I don't find everywhere. I actually like Russian Orthodox music. Since I married a Russian Orthodox lady, I was exposed to that, and I find it terribly moving. But yeah, there aren't many genres of music that I can't appreciate, and I've tried to play a few. Yeah, but I usually listen these days instead of playing. You have to, in music with an instrument, you have to keep it up or you lose it. And I just have not taken the time. I guess I could have taken the time to do that, but life got really busy for me, and
Ken, I hadn't thought about this till this is why I love the spontaneity of conversations like this. But with your Vesper services on Sunday, some of the music that you bring to those is absolutely stunning with some gorgeous artwork to go along with it. And how did you, or what have you done to sort of develop that knowledge yourself so you can share it with the rest of us? Has that been a lifelong thing of yours? Or?
Not lifelong. It kicked in for me in 2008 when I went to Rome. Because I grew up in the Baptist tradition, and Baptists are really like Latter-day Puritans. And you remember what the Puritans did in England is they destroyed everything that looked like art in churches because they wanted just pure holiness, right? So they destroyed all this unbelievable art, and their places of worship were just bare. They didn't want any distractions from God. And they thought maybe people valued this artwork too much. But anyway, going to Rome from my Baptist upbringing and just the stark walls of a church sanctuary, I couldn't believe there are images from the Bible everywhere. Stained glass, mosaics, paintings, everything. And it just I mean, for me, it took worship to a completely different level for me, because I was able to see, to engage visually in worship and not just with my ears. So that's where my love started.
Interesting.
Yep, and I began to explore churches in the U.S. that had unique or wonderful artwork in them. And now that we have the internet, you can have access to that kind of stuff now. In fact, I just heard that the Louvre in Paris has gone online.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
How exciting.
yeah, I'm going to be getting into that soon. Yeah, but it just, to me, worship ought to be a five senses experience and not just a one sense experience. And artwork and music are two of the ways that really just embellish worship for me anyway. Yeah.
Are there other pastimes and activities that are...
I have that four-letter
making your life?
word, pastime, invented in Scotland in the 15th century.
Yes.
Yeah.
That could be the next trivia question. We'll leave it till the Tom and Lisa show next Wednesday and
There you go.
have it as a call-in.
Someone has called it a good walk spoiled. Golf, I didn't start it until I was in seminary, and I started it because I thought ministers need to be able to play golf, because their members are going to ask them, and I don't want to just be a duffer. So I started playing in my 20s, which is a little late to learn, but being outside and occasionally hitting a good shot was a wonderful combination for me, and I fell in love with it.
Yes.
So I really enjoy golf, and that's my outdoor fun activity. My indoor activity, and it's not always fun, is home improvement. So I've been a home improvement do-it-yourself guy for a long, long time. My dad was that. He never took his cars to the auto shop. He did all it himself. He never had anybody come to the house to do anything. He did everything himself. And of course, I had to help him. So I got a little bit of an education along the way, and I found that it was such a great contrast to ministry, which is never done. You're just never finished, right? But when you do something in the house, paint something, then you get done and you can look at it and go, I'm finished. That feels really good.
Yeah.
And so I just began to try things, and so I've done wallpaper. That'll test your marriage. Floor tiles, wall tiles, electrical work. I do all that kind of stuff and kind of enjoy it. I'm renovating a closet in my house right now, turning it into a cedar closet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you hire out?
I'm sorry?
Do you hire out?
You can't afford me. I work slowly because I have to be very thoughtful. I don't do it all the time. So I'm pretty slow. So if you pay me by the hour, it'd be way too expensive.
Well, in the interest of absolutely clear transparency, if that's not a redundant phrase, for those of you that don't know, for those of you that don't care, just tune us out for a minute. But if you do care about Ken's golfing abilities, I am here to attest to the fact that he really did learn well, even if he didn't start till his 20s. And if you're taking him on for, as they say at home, a bob or two, then, pretty much give up your bob or two.
I would never do that. I would never take anyone's money.
And I understand you hit more than just one good shot around.
Oh, yeah, I do now. But I started struggling last fall a little bit, and I'm anxious to see if my game will come back in the spring. If it ever stops raining.
If it ever stops raining, yes.
Yeah.
Ken, as you thought about this conversation and the fact that you kindly accepted the invitation to join it, were there things that crossed your mind that you thought about talking about that we haven't talked about?
I thought you would ask me, how many angels can you put on the head of a pin? That's one of those classic theological questions. And I was going to tell you, I don't know.
I can tell I'm not a classical theologian, so.
Oh, no. These are really conversation starters, aren't they?
Yes.
Because when we do this for 30 minutes, then when residents see me out in the hall, they may pick up a conversation
Exactly.
and continue it. Same with any residents you interview. And it's all about the thing that we have missed for a year, which is being together with people and learning about their life and telling them about yours. And so no, you all have done well, covering the waterfront, as it were.
You had come to River Landing from other domains. What was the biggest surprise when you came, or that you have encountered while you've been here?
Right. I'm surprised that there was such a place for me to be something other than a chaplain here. I had always thought about doing stand-up comedy as a profession, and I never did. But I came here, and suddenly there was a niche for me to do that, and I had no idea that would happen. And so I was pleasantly surprised to be able to be afforded that opportunity. Yeah, so that's been a delight. Yeah, but also I didn't know I would enjoy working with the people that I work with as much as I do. Yeah, because I didn't know any of them. Yeah, and that's turned out to be wonderful too. And I knew the residents would be diverse and interesting in terms of their background, so I expected that. But I didn't know it would be so much fun to work with Brian, for instance.
Indeed.
Who's sitting right over there.
Well, Ken, thank you. This has just been a lovely start to our spring series.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I hope so. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
To experience staff in the workplace. Sometimes it's just hello as you pass, and so residents don't often get to know us. I think that's a wonderful idea to help them do that.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, along those lines, we are pre-taping these sessions. Ken's session is today on April the 16th, Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock. Next Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock, Betsy Seaton, who's the new Director of Community Relations, will be our guest. And we will follow then with 6 residents whom you've heard about already, who will be joining us for these chats until the early part of June. And at some point along the way, we'll make a decision about whether we will continue these sessions during the summer or whether we'll restart again in the fall. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Helen. And thank you, Brian, for getting us on the air. And we look forward to our next conversation next week.